wanted to offer a little bit of a framing statement. We're going to hear from some really compelling leaders on the front lines of this climate crisis. We'll hear from Dr. Sarah Nunez from North Carolina, from Kate Ziegler out of Los Angeles, and Alicia Cook from New Orleans. And as we were working on the service, I realized I started to think about, when Dr. King was organizing the 1968 Poor People's Campaign more than 50 years ago, he identified the evils of poverty, racism, and militarism that all these millions and millions of people were facing in this country and around the world, and realized that the only way we were ever going to effectively fight back against them was to understand them as deeply and intricately intertwined, as triplets, these evil triplets. And so in our time, more than 50 years later, it's very clear that the same forces that benefit from poverty, racism, and militarism also benefit from this rapacious exploitation of our natural resources. And the notion of these precious gifts we've been given from this earth are worth, the plunder and devastation of the planet, that the harms that they exact, that they're supposed to be used for the profits of the very few, and that the harms that they exact on our climatic systems, which are breaking down, that they have no responsibility for that the rest of us are supposed to just kind of figure things out along the way. And of course, on the front lines of this breakdown, they're the communities that are first and, harmed first and worst, always and forever, are poor and dispossessed communities, right? Whether it's at home in the United States or around the world, it is those with the least, stable, the least resilient infrastructure who live in the path of this devastation because there's nowhere else to live. There's nowhere else that's affordable. Who don't have insurance for one reason or another, whether it's because the insurance companies won't cover the risks of living in these places or just because insurance is too expensive, and whose lives are fundamentally already insecure, already wrapped up with confronting these other injustices and evils, right? So everything is enmeshed in these frontline communities, who are then placed at even greater insecurity because of these conditions that they're forced to live in. And as this administration and this Congress decide to pull resources out of FEMA, out of the EPA, open up more lands and waters to drilling and polluting industries, they're escalating these crises. And, in fact, even using them as leverage to compel state governments into accepting other immoral policies, whether that's withholding federal funds until they comply on immoral immigration orders, but, or other kind of devil's bargains, right? Showing again this connection between how these immoral and powerful forces are using poverty, this relationship between poverty, racism, militarism, and this climate crisis. So all of this kind of led me to think about my own tradition. In Hinduism, there's a story of the Samudra Manthan, this great churning of the oceans. And, seems like every story in my tradition is part of an epic battle. There's always an epic battle between the gods and the demons, the most powerful beings in the universe, basically, who are fighting for control over all of its resources. The most powerful are fighting for control over over all the resources in the universe. And in fact, both sides are wrong. Both are misusing their power. And in the course of that power struggle, they release this poison that threatens the whole of creation. Now, who steps in to save the universe? It's not the gods. It's not the demons. It's actually the forces who are most connected to the life that's at risk from the actions of the most powerful. It's the mother goddess. It is the goddess Lakshmi, who is born out of all this churning, who holds together this notion that what we need to live is actually the means of life, all of these precious resources, and love and morality and freedom. In other words, during these, really dangerous and precipitous times, what is also being born out of these struggles is what will save us ultimately. It's our communities stepping in, responding again and again, refusing to give up on each other. And as we'll hear tonight, in their response, there is hope, not a delusional utopian hope, right? Not a hope that doesn't make any sense in this crazy world, but a hope that's emerging from these crises, that's grounded in the stern resolve to show up, to take care of, and to fight for each other and for this earth and for all that she gives us, because we are inseparably connected. And it's through that connection that we survive. It's through that connection. It's that connection that we celebrate. It's through that connection that we find the possibility of joy and the strength and the power of the goddess who's always with us and in us.